March is here, and March means madness. The men's NCAA basketball tournament kicks off today, and here are my predictions for who will win each game and take home the national title. Starting in the East, Duke and Siena. I've got Duke knocking off Siena. And then Ohio State and TCU, a Big 10, Big 12 matchup. I've got the Horned Frogs moving on. St. John's and Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa had that improbable run a couple years ago against Texas, but I've got St. John's moving on. The Kansas Jayhawks and Cal Baptist. I've got Kansas moving on. And then Louisville and South Florida. I've got Louisville taking down the Bulls. And then a Midwest matchup between Michigan State and North Dakota State. I've got the Spartans moving on. And then UCLA and UCF, the Bruins and the Golden Knights. I've got the Golden Knights taking down the Bruins. And then UConn and Furman. UConn, the last team to go back-to-back as Florida looks to do this year. I've got them moving on into the second round in the East. Duke and TCU. I'm going to take Duke on in this one. St. John's in Kansas. St. John's, always one of the top teams in the tournament. Rick Pitino does a great job every year with his team. I've got them taking down the Jayhawks. Louisville and Michigan State. Give me Tom Izzo and the Spartans. Tom Izzo, one of the greatest coaches in college basketball and one of the best coaches in the tournament. And then UCF and UConn. Give me UConn. Into the Sweet 16, Duke and St. John's. I'm going to be taking Duke in this one. They are one of the top teams this year, is why they have the 1 seed. And then Michigan State and UConn. Give me Tom Izzo and the Spartans again. Moving on to take on Duke in the Elite Eight. But that's where I have the Spartans run coming to an end, as the Duke Blue Devils are going to be taking a trip to Annapolis, Indiana, and playing in the Final Four. We'll drop down on the bracket now. We'll start with the Florida versus, it's going to be Prairie View A&M. They won their playing game. Give me the Gators, as they will look for the repeat. And then Clemson and Iowa. Give me the Clemson Tigers. Vanderbilt and McNeese. I've got McNeese taking down Vanderbilt, as they've got Amir Ora Khan back with them once again in the tournament. And I think they're going to be able to make a first round upset. Nebraska and Troy. Two teams that have never won a tournament game. Give me the Cornhuskers to win their first. And then North Carolina and VCU. I've got the Tar Heels moving on. Tar Heels not as dominant as they used to be, but still one of the best teams. Illinois and Penn. Give me the Fighting Illini to win this one. And then St. Mary's and Texas A&M. I'm going to be taking St. Mary's and moving them up to the second round. And then rounding out the 15-2, Houston and Idaho. Houston, another one of those teams that makes a run every year. When is it going to be their year? Is this the year? Only time will tell. And then back up top to the second round, Florida and Clemson. Give me the Gators. McNeese and Nebraska. I'm taking Nebraska in this one. And then North Carolina and Illinois. This is where Illinois is going to dominate their way to a victory. And then St. Mary's and Houston. I'm going to be taking the Houston Cougars. Moving us into the Sweet 16, Florida and Nebraska. This, unfortunately, is where Nebraska's run is going to end, as I have them losing to Florida in the Sweet 16. And then Illinois and Houston. I've got the Houston Cougars moving on to take on Florida in the Elite Eight, where they are going to lose, and Florida will be going back to the Final Four for the second straight year. Moving across the bracket into the West, Arizona and LIU, Long Island University. Give me Arizona to pick up the victory. Villanova and Utah State. Give me Villanova to take down Utah State. And then Wisconsin and High Point, another one of the upsets I have in my bracket. I think High Point's going to come out on top over the Wisconsin Badgers. And then Arkansas and Hawaii. I've got Arkansas winning this one and moving on. BYU against Texas, who won their playing game against NC State to get into this one. I've got BYU moving on. Gonzaga and Kennesaw State. Gonzaga one of the most dominant teams in this tournament for a couple of years, the longest streak of making the tournament. I've got the Zags moving on. Miami and Missouri, and Battle of the M's. Give me Miami. Purdue and Queens. Queens, their first year in division eligible for the tournament, and they won the ASUN to get their automatic bid. But unfortunately, they have to run into a red-hot Purdue team coming off a Big Ten championship winner against Michigan. Give me Purdue. Speaking of Michigan, we will move to the second round now. It will be Arizona and Villanova facing off. Give me the Wildcats in Arizona to take down Villanova. And then High Point and Arkansas. I've got Arkansas coming out on top on this one. BYU and Gonzaga. BYU the 6th seed, Gonzaga the 3 seed. Give me the Zags moving on. Miami and Purdue. I'm taking Purdue to move on in this one. A trip to the Sweet 16 now. Arizona and Arkansas, a battle of the A's. Give me the Wildcats to move on to the Elite Eight. And then Gonzaga and Purdue. I've got Gonzaga going on, and that leaves us with Gonzaga versus Arizona. Give me the Wildcats for a trip to the Final Four. Into the bottom corner, it's going to be the Midwest region. Michigan and Howard, who won their play-in game. I'm going to be taking Michigan in this one. One of the most dominant teams in college basketball this year. In the top 5 pretty much the full season. Then Georgia and St. Louis. Give me the 9-8 upset with St. Louis. And then the Texas Tech Red Raiders and the Akron Zips. I'm going to be taking the Red Raiders. And then Alabama and Hofstra. Give me the Crimson Tide to move on. And then a foe for Alabama. It's going to be Tennessee taking on Miami of Ohio, who people didn't know if they were going to get in. They won their playing game, so they are dancing in the tournament. But give me Tennessee to take them down. Virginia and Wright State. Virginia's been on the wrong side of history many, many times in this tournament. UMBC took them down when they were a 1 seed. But I have Virginia coming out on top over the 14th-seeded Wright State. And then Kentucky and Santa Clara. I've got the 10 over the 7. Give me Santa Clara to upset Kentucky. And then Iowa State and Tennessee State to round it out. Give me the Cyclones. To the second round, Michigan and St. Louis. Give me the Wolverines to move on to the Sweet 16. Texas Tech and Alabama. Give me the Red Raiders. And then Tennessee and Virginia. I've got the Cavaliers moving on to the Sweet 16. And then Santa Clara and Iowa State. Santa Clara only going to pick up one upset as they are going to fall to Iowa State. The Sweet 16, Michigan and Texas Tech. Give me the Wolverines. Moving on to the Elite Eight. And then Virginia and Iowa State. Give me Iowa State to move on. And then another Midwest battle. The Michigan Wolverines and the Iowa State Cyclones. Give me Michigan to the Final Four, which sets up my predicted Final Four matchup of Duke and Florida and Arizona and Michigan. Florida coming out on top over Duke and Arizona coming out on top of Michigan. And give me Arizona to win it all in Annapolis, Indiana on April 6th on TBS. That's all I have for you today. Make sure to tune in at noon as the first games tip off shortly after noon today. That is March the 19th. So long from the Eli Angle Podcast.